Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's May 25th, 2020, and today I thought I'd give you an update on my health status. And a couple of things I'll say. First thing I want to say is that at some point in time I need to go back and review all of my notes and look at my videos that I've posted in the past and try and create a timeline of what's actually happened and what I've become aware of. So I hope to do that when things are all calmed down around here. And it's not obvious it wasn't obvious to me what was actually going on in my body initially. So one of the things I would say, I don't know that I reported this. I was thinking initially when I first had this infectious agent that I was, after winter, I was just out of shape. It was cold here in the Northeast, much colder than the coldness lasted much longer, and I really wasn't. And it was dark and gloomy, and rainy and cold, and I knew I needed to get lots of things done out here, and I was experiencing chest pains as a result of me overdoing it a bit. And I just thought, geez, you know what? My heart rate, my resting heart rate is 48 to 54 typically when I'm healthy with a really normal rhythm, and my pulse ox has always been about 99%, and I didn't realize that I was coming down. I was experiencing the first clinical signs of this disease with the chest pains, the rapid breathing, lethargy, feeling like my legs were had 5 or 10 pound weights, ankle weights on them, exercise intolerance, that sort of thing, and just getting out of breath and just feeling completely drained, exercise intolerance. And then I have posted the videos talking about, geez, I recognize I do have this infectious agent, and the effects of my central nervous system, my gastrointestinal system, certainly my respiratory system and all. And I've gradually been getting better and better each day, as long as I don't overdo it and push it. And the last couple of days I've been overdoing it and pushing it, and recently it's gotten warm here, in the high 70s to even the high 80s during the daytime. Last night I think it only got down to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which, it's just a rapid transition from a very cold, dark, and gloomy to a sunny, very warm day. The transition, going, a 50-degree change in temperature really is a significant change. Now, certainly the warm weather and the sunshine just made me feel good, more energetic, wanting to be outside, getting work done. And I tried recording this once. It got to be too long, so I'm going to try and get through this rapidly. One of the things I want to say is when I was doing a couple of the videos I posted, you could see I was doing lots of shoveling with moving wood chips and compost, creating the permanent raised beds, getting the paths done and all. Lately I've been doing lots of weeding, and these are the pokeweed, the dandelion, deep-rooted plants, and digging down in there. And I've been doing flame weeding as well. And I'm right-handed. And one of the problems I had a few days ago was I had so much swelling in my right forearm, and I attributed that to, at first I just thought, geez, I've got a significant tendinitis or a tenosynovitis, inflammation of some of the structures within my forearm, to the point where I could not flex my hand. My hand was in this position, and I could not extend it. So this is extension and this is flexion, extension, flexion. So, using the flame weeder, I have this, it's like a fire log little plastic Bic lighter, and you have a trigger in it to light it. I could not pull my finger. No matter how hard I tried, I could get it to about to there, and I'd be in extreme pain trying to deal with it. And when I palpated, feeling my forearm, it wasn't like it is now, like I can just easily press in on my tissue and I can actually move the skin around. Well, it was like a rock, taut, like someone had pulled my skin tightly around something that was swollen inside. And it bothered me a lot thinking about that, but that I couldn't do things. But I didn't realize that I was experiencing some vasculitis in this area. And as a result, I had quite a bit of bruising all under the side here as a result of the damage to some of the vessels, the blood vessels, as a result of this profound inflammation there. The other thing I would say is, come 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd be dragging my butt and feel like my legs were heavy weighted. And when I'd go in at nighttime, I'd put my feet up and I'd massage my calves, and by the next morning, my legs would feel much better. I wasn't say I'd be back to normal. But what I was getting was, I was getting leakage of fluid from my capillaries. All right, so when we think about the cardiovascular system, most people are familiar with the heart. We have two halves of our heart. The smaller half, the lighter duty half pumps unoxygenated blood to our lungs, short distance, and then the pulmonary veins deposit oxygenated blood into the left side of our heart, which is the much thicker, more robust musculature, and that pumps out through our arteries, which have an elastin recoil, so it can maintain significant pressure during the whole first phase of the cardiac cycle, and therefore deliver blood, as most people would think, to the tissues and then back through the veins. It's a bit more complicated than that. The arteries, if you were to take them out, I don't know how many feet it would be if you ended all our arteries. It's probably less than 1,000 feet, and same thing with our veins. But if you were to take the more important vessel, the capillaries, those tiny little vessels that just a red blood cell or white blood cell can fit through, single row, if you were to take those and hook them end to end, they'd wrap around the earth at the equator, twice. So we have the most vessels that we have in our body are these capillaries, and they're the ones that deliver the oxygen and the nutrients to the tissues, and they're the ones that take the carbon dioxide from the tissues and our waste product and put it back into our circulatory system, and our circulatory system can take it to the liver, the kidneys, and our digestive system. We can eliminate those those waste products. Now, the arteries have a higher pressure system than the veins have. And so we have hydrostatic pressure that causes some fluid to leak out of our capillaries in excess of the amount of blood fluid that comes back through our veins. So there's this net deposit of fluid into our tissues, which is really important. And then we have another component of our vascular system called our lymphatics. And most people think of that as being the main part of the immune system. And that takes those excess fluids from our tissues that have been deposited through the hydrostatic pressure, brings it back through the lymphatics, and then dumps it back into our vein that leads right to our heart. So the whole circulation system works extremely well, and it's due to pressure gradient that causes a net deposit into our tissues. And if you've been standing stationary or sitting on an airplane, you may develop edema in your lower limbs because you aren't moving your muscles, and the muscles help to pump that fluid that's in our lymphatics back up through the lymph nodes and into our circulatory system. Some people that are getting edema, when they take off their socks at night, they'll see an indentation in their lower limbs and all, as a result of the edema building up the fluids and all. And so that's one thing. So, and I'm sorry I'm giving this long explanation here, but one of the things I would notice was I was having fluid building up in my lower limbs, and that would account for that extra weight and me feeling like I'm carrying this extra weight. When I get into bed at nighttime, I massage my calves, elevate them, and by morning my lower limbs would feel lighter, not back to normal, but lighter. And then when I had this and then the bruising, it dawned on me that and it's the hydration status correlates with this whole thing, and the sweating with the heat system. So I'm drinking excessive amounts of fluids to maintain my hydration, but some of this fluid is ending up going into my lower limbs, and as a result of this extra leakiness of some of my vessels, I'm getting a net deposit in my tissues, causing the tissues to swell, and me working some of these tissues is causing pain and disruption of the vessels. So, so there is a cellulitis, a vasculitis that does occur with this. There are some recent published articles in various journals about vasculitis, about some clinical consequences of this vasculitis, like some children have developed terrible rashes and they get systemic inflammation all over the body as a result of the vasculitis. Some actually have a cardiopulmonary arrest where they actually die. Some kids have died, some have been successfully resuscitated and improved, and this is after potentially testing positive or even testing negative. And I could go on about some of the reasons some of them test negative is, or they test very weakly positive, is because the ACE receptors that are in our lungs and are in all these other tissues that I've talked about, they're less numerous in many children. Makes us wonder, geez, and I've talked before about the scale system. So if you're really healthy and you don't have any other morbidities and you're young, you've got a pretty good way of combating the other side of the infectious agent, the virulence and the dose. So the higher the dose of a very virulent system, despite how healthy you are, there's more of a chance that the infectious agent will have more of a profound effect. The more comorbidities and the more elderly you are with this particular infectious agent, the dose doesn't have to be that high, just with a highly virulent agent. So the balancing system. So children get lower doses based on some of the peer-reviewed literature because they have decreased number of nasal mucosa where they can't replicate as many cells and therefore could test negative or have very minute or no symptoms of the disease. And there's so many people, who knows how many people in the world have the infectious agent but have no, what I'm going to say, detectable or obvious clinical manifestations. And when I say that, and one of the reasons that I'm saying this is because so many clinicians, doctors and nurses have been thrown into this severe, earth-shaking infectious disease, rapidly being spread, and the services and the resources being overwhelmed. So the doctors and nurses, instead of being able to do one-on-one or one-on-two, are actually working with 6 different patients or 8 and trying to decide, does this one need a ventilator? Do they actually need to be on a ventilator, or would a ventilator be the thing that would save them? What about this medication? Reportedly, this medication decreases the severity of disease, or it may shorten the duration of the illness. So the doctors are trying to figure all of these things out, and when you're thrown into a situation like this, and you don't have the time or the benefit of seeing many cases and seeing all the clinical sequelae, all of the complexity, all the diversity, the breadth of the different clinical manifestations, and so in a couple of years' time, I believe that that with lots of research and really looking at what are the long-term clinical consequences of those people who may have been asymptomatic or may have been had the disease and recovered from it. Could there be some chronic associated disease processes associated with, or is this one that it's over with? If you survive it, you're good to go, and you don't have to worry about reinfection. We don't have the benefit of being able to take the time, examine patients carefully, and run lots of tests, and and study large groups of people. Everything's thrown at the medical facilities and being overwhelmed at this point. Now, as the numbers of patients being admitted to the ICUs and needing to be on ventilators are going to decrease, I think researchers are going to have more of an opportunity, and over time, over the next couple of years, we'll be able to go back and really reflect and see what's going on. You know, I wasn't recognizing that my chest pains initially were related to this, that my lethargy, my exercise intolerance was. I wasn't even recognizing, I thought I had tenosynovitis or tendinitis here in my forearm. I didn't recognize that I was getting some dependent edema in my lower limbs, and that's why my legs felt so heavy as well. So it's these things are easily overlooked if we don't have the time to question the patients, to do daily weights, get them up, get them on a scale and see what their body weight is, see what the urine production is, see what their hydration status is by doing some quick assessment tests every day. So over time, I think clinicians will have a much better grasp of the diversity of clinical signs, the potential ramifications of infections, maybe the differences between even different people of different races, whether there's more receptors for these ACE receptors in the nasal mucosa of blacks, because blacks are certainly they're at an economic disadvantage. And that is a possibility. That's the sole issue. But there may be other things. We may find that some groups of people have a higher number of ACE receptors in their nasal mucosa, and therefore they can get a lot more replication of this infectious agent and then get down into the lungs and go to other tissues as well. So remember, the dose, not just the dose that you received yourself, but how rapidly you can propagate and get more of that highly infectious agent into your system. So the virulence and the dose are very important. So instead of going on any further with all of these things, my thoughts are we're real early in this whole process, really super early. We've got lots of research to do over the years. And it's real easy to go down the different paths because politicians and people who run companies really are pushing one agenda, and people who are really concerned are pushing another agenda about stay-at-home, social distancing. There'll be studies, hopefully, because masks, I think, will be an important component of how we prepare for these diseases. And I think I've talked about this in a previous video. When you're going through your third and fourth year of medical school or veterinary school, just the process of gowning up and not contaminating your gloves or your gown or your mask by touching some part of your body. Yes, people have been told to wear different material masks, making them out of cloth, using surgical masks, using N95s. All of these things, people know that surgical masks, well, they're basically disposed of after every single procedure. And you have someone helping you get gowned up and dressed so that you're not touching your any part of your body or any other surface. And you'll see surgeons will often be like this because they've got a sterile gown, they've got sterile gloves, they want to go like this so that they're not going to touch anything. But people don't know these things, and people have been told to wear the masks over and over again, and they touch the mask after having concentration of these infectious agents on it, and then setting it down and then re-wearing it, touching the outer surface of it or the inner surface of it, and contaminating other tissues. So there's so much to learn as a general population, how to actually take good care of ourselves and not recontaminate ourselves thinking that this is the best practice to use. And we got to allow our epidemiologists, our clinical investigators, the histologists, the microbiologists, the virologists, the geneticists, so many groups of people that can come together and try to put this puzzle together so that we have a better understanding. Right now, we've been just caught up in trying to getting out of the house that's on fire. Later on, you think, oh, geez, I should have had my medical records, or I should have had this, that, or the other thing. Right now, our clinical situation is the house is on fire and we're getting the hell out of there. And later on, with some hindsight, we'll know much more about it, and there'll be, hopefully there will be more of an educational opportunity for all of us to learn how to protect ourselves even more. So with that, I'll end this video. I'll try to do some videos on the garden update and the second food forest pretty soon. Sorry I'm behind with all this stuff, but I wanted to give you a bit of a health update. Hopefully I've covered everything in this version of the video. Thanks so much for watching, folks. Take good care of yourselves. Do what you believe is the right thing for your own health and well-being. And do what you have to do. We all understand that, but just do it as safely as possible. Thanks, folks. Take care, and good luck out there. Bye-bye now.